We will get this rolling, even though we have one clock that's a little bit behind. Are we good, Jill?
Yep.
Okay. We will call to order the Cumberland County Finance meeting, and we will begin with a roll call. Please, Audrey.
Commissioner Nieder.
I am here.
Commissioner Fauci.
I'm here.
Commissioner Engelberger.
All right. Is there any public comment to come before the board at this time? If you're online and you want to make public comment, please use the raise your hand feature. Audrey, are you seeing anyone raising a hand?
Not at this time.
All right, we will move on then to the approval of the minutes from the February 5th meeting. If someone would make a motion, please.
Oh, I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We will move on into the presentation. It looks like we have with us Beth Chornak. Is Robert online, or is he? Okay, he's online, doing an Infor Cloud Suite upgrade phase 1 status. Say that fast 10 times. All right. Ms. Chornak, how about it?
All right, Cloud Suite. It's been my life for the last 6 months, and pretty much all it has been. So we just want to update you on where we're at in the project, what we've been working on, and where we're at right now, and where we're going into the future. And then we will talk about the lease accounting software and go from there. Okay. So far through the project, we had our kickoff and we had our project discovery. We did a lot of our project discovery a few years ago. We had RPI come in and do the discovery, but since we kicked off, we revisited that discovery, made sure that things were still on track with what they already knew about Cumberland County, and added anything new that we would need to implement. So that was completed. And then we started going into Cloud Suite Bootcamp. Bootcamp is just their term for training. We got to get into the system, learn how to maneuver through the system, do general things, but not really understand how it's working. Then we went on to Conference Room Pilot, which was taking the bootcamp knowledge and expanding on it on not only are you doing a journal entry, but these choices have these consequences, that kind of thing. So you're learning how the software is working. We also, at the same time, we had a technical boot camp. This was mainly for the ERP department, and this is how the system runs behind the scenes, how to keep it up and running efficiently for everybody in the county to use. So that was completed. We've been through 2 data migrations, and they have both gone fairly well. We get told by both Infor and RPI, our data is very clean and does migrate rather easily for them. We have come across a few glitches just because we do things like multi-ledger in the system that doesn't come over because the whole system and how they handle that process has changed. So that's a bit of a manual process. So we have come across a few of those that, we're working on to smooth them out so that everything comes over accurate. And right now we've been in the middle of unit testing. We are in week 4. And we have a couple more days of it, and we are about 87% done with the unit testing. RPI provided all the scripts. Everybody on the design team, major players, have all been in the system working on these scripts, making sure that things that they've already set up are working. This is just this piece works. So we're not the whole start to finish yet.
When you say unit, like, how are they breaking them down into units? Like, what type of a unit? Can you give me an example of that?
So mostly it's by module. So cash is a module and accounts payable is a module. We're looking at the accounts receivable as something new to implement since we currently don't use that in Lawson now. So those are the modules that we're calling units.
Okay. And then the one other question I would have before you exit this slide is from that kickoff and project discovery, and when you revisited, did you identify anything that you needed to add in that was new or had been, missed, for lack of a better word, before?
I don't know that we missed any of the major items, like the concepts of it. It was defining those broad concepts into like more detail that they understood why we were doing something. There was a few things that we have added to the kickoff because they were new to the county. One of them is the lease account.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
all right. All right, so this slide, before I start looking at the pictures, our overall project process is at 34%. What you're seeing in the pictures are tasks, not time, okay? So even though in the technical process, there's 89% done, it's 89% of the tasks are done. We still have 11% to go, but those are the more time consuming things. So it looks like, oh my gosh, we're like 80% done. That's not the case. It's the tasks that are done, the individual tasks that are completed. So, and this is just phase one. It has nothing to do with HR payroll. It's only the financials and the procurement stuff.
So Beth, having said that, let's just round that up to, let's say 40%. How long is it gonna take to do the remaining 60% of the work?
Well, our go live date is November 10th. November 10th. So we will be working right up until that time
Okay.
on phase one.
And are you on track for that?
Yes, we are. Can I get
Okay.
Okay, so this to me means more. This is the health of the project, and this is RPI's view of it, not our personal view. So they are saying we are on task with all of our items. The HCM and the payroll just have calendars because those are phase two, and we haven't even started those. So we are on task, and they say it's a very healthy place to be.
Would you please remind me what HCM means?
Human capital management. Thank you. I remember that one. Don't ask the others. Okay.
And that's when they're saying finance, they're encompassing cash, AR, and AP.
Yes. Budgeting.
Budgeting, okay.
Supply would just be requisitions, procurement, contracts.
Does phase two start on November 11th?
No, it actually starts in August, I believe.
Okay.
Of 26,
Of 25.
25.
Yes.
So then we're running two phases
Right.
concurrently. We're
So-
okay with feeling good about that?
Yes, because by the time we start the HR stuff, we'll be more into the end user testing and the training of the end users. So it kind of like less of the design team on the financial part, and then they can, the ones that need to can move over to the HR side. Okay. Upcoming milestones. We're starting our third data migration. Robert actually copied data over this morning. And then the next thing after that is the system integrated testing. So we did the unit testing where we're just testing pieces. The system integrated testing is start to finish. So it will go from a requisition through purchase order, through receiving, through AP, through cutting the check, reconciling the check from start to finish of that whole process for every process that we have here in the county. So cash deposits, it'll go from entering them to closing out. So that's what the system integrated testing is. After that is the user acceptance testing, which will be pulling more of the users, people who enter invoices, people who do the cash deposits. We'll have them in more or less just to get their hands into the system before they're actually trained to make sure that we're meeting their needs as well as our needs. Then comes end user training. We have a changeover plan through RPI to bring us up there and not scare everybody. And then go live and post support for the FSM phase 1. We'll continue 3 months after go live. So what's nice about that and why we really push to go live in November is that first year end close, we will have support for it, as opposed to going live at the beginning of the year and we don't have their support when we end up doing that year end close. So that was one of the reasons we pushed to go live in November.
Will you be still running things on 2 systems from November, or does it
No, it'll be cut over.
be cut over?
The only things that will remain on premise would be the HR and payroll stuff. So. Okay, this is Robert's portion.
There he is.
Hey, how are you all doing? So one of the things that came up here that we needed to include was lease accounting. During our initial conversations, it didn't seem like a viable option, but Infor has made some improvements, and we had a demo about a month ago, or maybe a little longer, and we determined it was something that we wanted to look into implementing during this phase 1 of our project. And I'm going to let Bill talk to the next slide as to some of the reasons for using it.
To give you a little background, I'd say 5 years ago, we had a couple of GASB accounting standards that came through for leases. The first one, it mainly dealt with rental leases, MDJ offices. We had around 10. We grew to about 14 leases. I managed it in Excel. And at the time, we discussed whether or not we should get a secondary software, third-party software to manage it. Now we've had a new standard come out for IT arrangements, which deal with computer software. And as we all know, everything's going web-based, and they're going on subscription-based type of arrangements. So that initial standard now doubled as far as the number of leases that are being managed. And also, as you guys see coming across your desks, there's more and more software that's going to the cloud, IT, Infor, for instance. This software, not only it would do what that third-party software would do, but it's integrated into Infor. It would help manage the documents that are associated with the leases. It would eliminate duplicative efforts that are happening in the finance office and our office to manage the timing of the payments, the booking of the journal entries. It would all be housed in this software. And you may be thinking, okay, we're only talking about maybe 30 leases. This module would be opened up to not only the ones that apply to my standards, but also other leases within the county, such as copiers, and it would help manage the accounts payable payments to make sure they're occurring to meet the due dates and booking it to the right period. And I believe there's a lot of worth in this module for the price tag associated with it. No one wants to include more expensive a project, but I believe it would pay for itself by eliminating a lot of duplicative efforts.
Go ahead. So that was one of my questions. Does this come up because of the accounting changes regarding the way that we manage leases? I know Carrie has been in a couple of times, and that's just happened recently, right? Was it in the last 2 years or year?
When did GASB 96?
A couple of years ago.
Yeah. So,
Okay, okay. So, and we keep growing leases
yeah, absolutely.
as part of our standard business operations. When you're saying this tracks all the information relating to this, as it relates to payments. Are you also able to plug in maturity terms and renegotiation, if it's a lease with a renegotiation provision and that sort of thing?
I'm glad you mentioned it because not only it does do that, it lets offices know when leases are coming to term. As far as when they should start looking to renegotiate a lease with an MDJ office or an IT arrangement maybe affecting Mark's office.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, when you talk about collaborative management of county leases between all responsible parties, to me, that means that the solicitor's office will be able to use this, facilities will be able to use it, children and youth will be able to use it. No,
I would say, as far as the payment of the leases, I think you would want to have a own, like Yvonne would want to own, making sure the payments to the MDJ offices are occurring. And I think she would help with that.
So right now, each individual MDJ office is responsible for paying that monthly lease. With this module, we could house it in one central department, where that central department clicks a button and the system generates all the payments for all the MDJ leases. It's a huge efficiency for both of our offices because the MDJ offices, they don't pay a lot of bills. They're not used to processing. And this takes it out of their hands and it does it accurately and it does it timely. Like Bill said, it will post it where we need it and when we need it.
so this only works for in the finance world. This doesn't help facilities track end dates on leases, trigger dates.
Yeah, it will give them a notification. So if they have a business central lease, it's a 5-year lease, right? And it has an escalator in it every year. So you put all that detail into the system and then year 2, we don't have to touch that lease again because we already put the detail behind it. It will automatically generate that next payment with that escalator. And then coming up to the end of the term, we can set to notify facilities 90 days, 120 days, hey, your lease is coming up. It's time for you to reach out and renegotiate.
And Ron, I think the one thing that, a couple of questions I have regarding that. So who would be doing the entry of these leases? Who would be making sure that good information is going? Is that finance that would end up doing that? Is it you, Bill?
We haven't worked out those details, but it would probably be one of the core offices.
Because I wouldn't want us to set a term like, oh, it's gonna trigger every 90 days, because some leases have a 6-month notification, so you have to look at every detail of every lease before it goes into that system, so that it would be performing at its best.
And the solicitor will also have a piece of this, because the lease is a contract.
Yes, yeah, so right now, there's not a connection between the contract and the lease contract. It's would be 2 separate entry paths. We're hoping in the future, since this is new, we're in for that once the contract comes through our approval process, then we can identify it as a lease. And then there would be no duplicate entry of a lease and a contract. Like the system would know this contract is a lease and to handle it. Right now, it's kind of separate and you would have to enter the contract and you would also have to enter the lease separately. But it's still a huge.
I'm not trying to be difficult. That's just, I'm like, why?
That's our response when we heard that.
Okay.
Why isn't there a?
It's coming.
They're just not there yet. It's something that Infor had previously, and whatever reason we don't know, they pulled it offline. They rebuilt it, they restructured it. We demoed it, and Bill and I both agreed like this is a great product.
Yeah.
There's still some improvements to do in the future.
You did with the new version.
Yeah, we demoed the new version. Yeah,
Had you tried the
we had not seen the previous
version that got the thumbs down? Right.
It just came in conversation with RPI that Infor has just rolled out a new lease module. And we're like, well, we were actually looking at software, so we'd love this demo and see what it's like.
Mark, approximately how many copier leases do we have around the county?
We're trying to get away from the copier leases,
Okay.
but we still have a handful. You're also gonna find that there's leases for mail machines, which we've just renewed. So those are on, I think, a 3-year renewal process. So even though they might not meet the threshold that Bill has today for his requirements, the process improvement would still be beneficial to my office to utilize that automation.
And so I guess, Dana, what I was talking about, I thought that there was a treatment of leases that we had to, from a financial reporting standpoint, that we had to manage differently, that had a different standard.
This will handle that.
This will handle
Yeah,
that.
we can indicate which ones are associated with the standards and which one are just your mail machine.
Okay. Okay.
And from my
What could-
standpoint, this is extremely important. It's getting more and more cumbersome to do the lease information, and this will create, there's a lot of duplicate effort because there has to be the way it's set up now in spreadsheets. This just kind of closes the deal and will make it so much better.
So I guess that's what I was gonna say. How much time does finance spend on coming up with the numbers for those leases for our accounting reporting?
The majority of time is spent in the controller's office.
Okay.
So our time is probably more minuscule than theirs, but there is duplicate efforts. Like we're tracking things on spreadsheets, Bill's tracking things on spreadsheets, and departments are probably tracking things on spreadsheets.
I'll share, sorry, I'll jump in and share some of that, but I had budgeted for some software that Bill had also budgeted for because it's part of his lease requirements. So I did catch it in January and I called Carrie and I said, take it away from me because I see Bill has it. So there are some duplicate extra work being done by departments that this would maybe shed some light on as well.
So this is really wired for leases. Does it have any other application? Like, can we use it for anything else? Is there anything else you think where we have a schedule of payments? Like what if, like our PIB loan, like would it make sense to put that in? Does it make sense to put in like a bond, our bond issuances, like they wouldn't account for that appropriately,
No,
I
I was
guess.
wondering if it automates lease payments, would it automate, for example, Lisa, the payments that go out to foster parents?
I don't think it's gonna handle
Yeah,
that
it's
piece.
not. Yeah,
It is truly dedicated to the
leases,
okay.
but like a term loan, if we would engage in a term loan, there's not much difference from that on a lease. Like a vehicle, like we buy a vehicle, we don't lease it, but we do term financing. I don't know if that ever happens around here, but
I don't know, we really didn't look at it with that type of thing in mind, but we obviously could always explore.
And the AP module might be able to do something like that too. We've just inherently turned that portion off so that automatic payments aren't happening. Generally. Doesn't mean we can't.
so my concern, and I was talking with Beth a little bit before the start of the meeting, is this is a module that's come out of nowhere that we didn't know we needed until we're in this project. And this project is really expensive to begin with. And I'm wondering like how many more are out there? Like how many more times are we going to be revisiting the project? And I get, maybe we didn't know what we didn't know, but
So it's not that this came out of left field. We knew we needed it. But Lawson had pulled their lease accounting off the table. So they were looking at other options that would have come forward in a different manner. When they put it back on the table, they reviewed it. So it's something we knew we needed. It's just that at that point in time, they didn't have it.
okay. So what, is there anything else out there in the process of this? Because this has been a project that's been going on, I think ever since I've been around, and that's not been all that long, but 5 years, I've been aware of it. So what else is out there?
So we do know there are other things that we want to do in like a phase 2. And that would be AI payments and stuff like that. But we haven't recommended bringing that and moving it into phase 1. I don't know that there is.
We've been testing all kinds of capabilities of the system and some things we like, some things we don't like. There's been a couple things where like we went through the testing and that's not gonna work from us. Let's go a different route. This
That's
is the
kind of
one.
the nature of the beast. We're always going to be a hostage to the development cycle of what's new and greatest.
So this is kind of the one thing that's really jumped out to us so far.
And I think the one other question that is very relevant in this conversation as we look at the costs here, that the costs for the HR components are already factored into the overall project. That you're not going to be coming back and saying, well, no, we need another couple $100,000 for that, or you know, as those are deployed. So, I mean, this project is huge. It's a very, very, very large project for the county. So.
Beth, from a project standpoint, so what is the biggest point of schedule risk? Since you're saying we need to be done for the close of the year and your target is November 10?
Mhm.
Okay, so where's the biggest vulnerability?
I would say right now, the biggest vulnerability is the fund accounting. So right now we're setting it up with one company and instead of the companies, they're funds. So we're following that accounting through the system to make sure all the due tos, due froms, all that stuff works. So I think that's our biggest question right now. It's looking positive from all our testing that we've been doing, but there's always that one thing that's like, oh, that broke the whole thing. So I'm hesitant to say it's 100% success until we do the situation testing where we go from start to finish. But I would say that would be our biggest hurdle at this point.
Beth, I know that there was nomenclature issues around funds and accounts, and have you worked through all of that?
That's all pretty much worked out, yeah.
Okay.
So in Lawson today, what Lawson calls a company, we call a fund. In Lawson Cloud Suite, a company is just going to be the county. And then we actually have a place for fund that we can put the funds in. And instead of doing intercompanies and having to close things 64 times, we have one company with the funds underneath and we close once. So.
What time savings will that be, do you estimate, based on this new structure?
I don't know if it's necessarily made a time savings, but it allows us to take advantage of all the capabilities of the current system, because that's how it's designed to work. So
It eliminates some shortcomings that we currently experience with having 50 companies
Okay.
and only having one.
Okay.
so there's all kinds of advantages to doing it versus, that's why we're really trying to make it work with using the fund counting structure. Because
Interfund balancing as well. That's what I was wondering. Is there any time saving through balancing or efforts of closing the month end that make it any better, or
We
just?
went through that today, and rather than
I think it's cleaner.
it is.
So it's cleaner. Like, so you look at it, it makes more sense. A lot of things we did in the old version, the one we're on now, having one HR company, one payroll company, one accounts payable company, that we made happen in the system now, that's built into the new system where we don't have to fight that setup that we have now, because we only want to do payroll once. We don't want to do payroll 53 times. So that is the fund accounting. That's what is driving us to get to the one company and the funds, as opposed to having multiple companies and having to deal with those issues.
So if in this new setup, the one company is the county. Can you give me an example of how it works now? Like what are companies, what are they specifically?
So what drives Lawson now is if a department needed a balance sheet, they had to be their own company. So aging needs their own balance sheet. So aging is a company. Even though they're just a department of the county, they needed their own balance sheet. Therefore, they got their own company. So anywhere we found that all the human services have their own company, public safety has their own company. So everywhere that we found those issues, they had to be separated out as a company. Now it's funding, but now we're all under one company.
Got it. Thanks. That was very helpful. Thank you.
So like Beth mentioned, that's probably our biggest risk point is fund accounting. But I think we overcame a big hurdle the last couple of weeks with our unit testing. And I think there's still some things for us to work out, but it's encouraging at this point. We've gone through a full round of testing, and fund accounting has so far is working.
It's real wood, right?
It is real wood.
If we went through unit testing and we're like fund accounting didn't work, then we would be regrouping and saying, can we still meet that deadline?
So where in the timeline does your end-to-end testing begin?
So what time?
At what point in your timeline does the end-to-end testing be integrated?
The last week in March that starts. The
Okay.
rec to check is what I call it, but it actually goes further than that, so.
All right.
So if the lease accounting implementation, if you approve this module, the go live would align with our current schedule. So that would go live at the same time that the financials and the procurement go live. Robert?
So something else that had come up that we just found out about last week was the need for an additional tenant, as Infor calls it. It can be thought of as more like another server. So currently, when it was initially presented to us, we only were told that we needed a production, a test, and a train. Our PI reached out to Infor a couple weeks ago and said, hey, can we get a proof of concept of how the data migration is going to work for HR, because our PI is starting to look at the HR phase just to get something started. At that point, they were told by Infor that they needed, or that we needed, a completely separate tenant to do this data migration. This tenant would only be needed for the 2 years, essentially from now until we go live with HR, and that would go away. But it is something that is required to do that part of the project as planned.
Why would it go away?
So it is an additional cost, and it's not something that we would need a fourth environment for. We would be able to maintain our normal production environment for day-to-day work, and then our test and our train for development and training purposes.
So what's the purpose of the additional tenant?
For data migration.
So it's
Just gonna kind of hang out there while it moves.
Repository.
Got, thanks.
and it will be where we do our HR testing as well. So
Okay.
that's where that's all going to take place.
Okay. So Robert, you have on the slide, it's similar to a separate server. So this tenant is an actual hard piece of equipment like a server, or is it a cloud-based tenant?
It's a cloud-based
Okay.
server, but it's
Okay.
similar to now how we have our on-premise servers. We have a test server and a production server. I thought that might make a little more sense than the word tenant all the time, even though that's what I keep saying.
It does make more, I mean, it
It's-
does, like.
It's a virtual space, so they call it a tenant, they call it a server, you can call it an instance. Product line in the old Lawson is what they called it before, but it's all essentially connected, so hardware doesn't matter when you're in the cloud.
Right. And it does make sense then that it would not be needed at the end of this process.
It's
Correct.
like
Yeah.
purgatory for
Yes,
our
it is.
data
So it's either rejected or advanced to the cloud, I
We
guess.
had
Prayers to
Yeah.
release it.
Oh,
Ay, ay, ay. Okay, so you have to put this data, this tech language in language I understand, please.
No, that was helpful, Robert. I
you.
appreciated that you.
Yeah, he
you
did, thank you.
Switched it to server. It just became very clear when you did that. Thank you.
of course.
So it's funny, we keep talking about phase two, which is the HR module, but that will be the third year of this project.
correct.
Okay, because when we're looking at the numbers and how this project is being funded, I think that that's a good delineation that the board makes, so.
So the cost of the lease accounting management module is $39,081. That includes the first year being prorated at $3,881, and then 2 to 5 years, the years 2 through 5 would be the standard 8,800. They did it this way to line up with our current contract so that we are on the same schedule that our current contract is on, so that we're not having two different renewals 5 years down the road. The 8,800 for years 2 through 5 are only due to be paid on those years, not ahead of time. The quote we got from RPI to implement the lease accounting management module was $50,800. It consists of approximately 254 hours. Again, this is time and material. Time. I don't know what materials it would be, but they only charge us for what they're actually using. So we talked amongst ourselves, and it's like, they set up one lease, teach us how to use the lease, and then we can put the leases in ourselves at some point. So we're looking to, that way we learn how to do it on site and not be reliant on them putting all our leases in there up front, and then we're like, why did they do that? So that's what we're looking at. So the total cost for the lease accounting management is $89,881 and change.
So I see the cost of the tenant isn't included.
Robert?
What are we estimating for that?
So I reached out to the solicitor on this because I wasn't sure how exactly to present that. In conversation with him, he had told me that to let you know that we're keeping the number confidential because it is something that is being made as right as they can, and that he can get you that number at a later date.
That just makes me have 10 more questions that I'm not gonna ask, I guess, if there's a reason for confidentiality around this. But you're saying it's temporary and it's going to be for a minimum of 2 years, so the cost will be, whatever cost we're going to be given is going to illustrate that. Is that
Correct,
accurate?
yes.
Say it's a negotiated price and it, because it's not in writing yet, that's part of the reason.
Okay, so it's just that it's in negotiations at this time. Okay. So then from a logistical standpoint of things, there is a potential for a motion to this project, but if we don't have all of the numbers, how would we see doing that? I saw that.
The capital includes,
The capital includes,
is all inclusive.
is it an estimate that we are negotiating to that point, or is it one that we are,
It's one we feel comfortable with.
okay? I saw it, because that's how I was on, what year are we in?
Can I just mention too, like, I know we're talking about the tenant right now, but for the lease management, we've looked at other softwares. One of the more popular ones out there is called Leaseberry, and that costs about $25,000 a year. So not only is this an integrated solution for us, but it is significantly cheaper as well. Sorry.
Thanks, Lisa. That gives a good frame of reference for the cost that's being requested here.
It sounds like this is a time saver. I'd like to silence yeses, yeah.
Definitely yes.
Okay. Well, that's not, so I'll share this with you and then it's this that we're talking about, but they haven't negotiated, so
Yeah.
that's not impactful. Just so that we have a frame of reference for what that amount is. All right. There any other questions that we have for the crew here or Robert on Zoom? When will we see our next update? After the March?
Just that.
I think it's important for the board to know as this is progressing, how you're feeling, even if it's not, you know, if it's just a very brief update, so that we know that this is progressing well. It's a really important part to how we run the county from a financial standpoint.
So we've been meeting with the steering committee every month, every 4 weeks, I think John has it set up. So however you want.
I think I'll leave it up to you all to work with Stacy to determine the best next milestone for you to kind of update the board on where things stand. So, and at this point, you're pleased with the partners that we're dealing with in this.
Yes.
I think RPI is one of the main vendors that are helping make this happen.
Mhm.
All right, I don't have any additional questions. If anyone does,
I do
please
not.
feel free to ask. If not, there is a potential motion to approve. If the board has an interest in that, I would ask someone make that motion or.
I think it's a very tough motion to frame.
It's laid out on the agenda if it's acceptable in that format.
Dana, if we take action on this now, are we tying our hands in any way in regards to the tenant negotiation?
No, and I think we have a final number, but it's still. They don't, how do you say it? They don't really, we're still negotiating until it's signed. But I think we're very close to a final number.
We're scheduled to have that contract covered for you tomorrow, if the capital passes today.
The amount that was disclosed. Okay. Say that again?
We're scheduled to have the contract addendums come in front of you tomorrow at the BOC meeting.
But that will not include the new tenant.
Yes.
It will,
It will,
okay.
it'll be everything that we're
Okay.
asking for today.
So even though we're going to possibly make a motion on a very specific number, that number could be different tomorrow?
We're hoping not. I mean, I think we're fairly confident on.
I think
in
you're
that
saying
number.
it's close enough.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, gonna ask a question. And I wish that was still up there.
Oh,
We had 89, 881, 64. Do you know exactly where I'm going, don't you, Stacy?
I do, and I would prefer you not ask your question. Because of the advice we received from the solicitor.
Because, okay, then I will not ask the question.
Thank you.
So the amount that was presented for a motion of an increase, of a total increase, should we say up to that amount, perhaps, in case the negotiation would be less?
So just as a point of reference, the capital project approvals is to set that money aside. The capital project already includes some contingency, so whether the number that is included in your packets is the actual number, there is ample funds available in that capital project to make up any difference. But yes, saying up to that amount would be perfectly acceptable.
The soonest amount we're talking about is probably minuscule in relation to the contingency.
Correct,
Okay.
correct. Some might say a drop in the bucket would be a good visual there.
So I don't know if you would.
And I know.
Yeah.
I know. So I'm gonna move to approve the amended capital project request for ERP for InfraCloud Suite with an increase up to $112,282 for a new total project cost up to $6,929,942. Are we okay?
Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, on the discussion, the only point I would want to make under that discussion of that total project, $3 million of this project has been covered by the ARPA funding. And in that total cost includes maintenance for this software for a 5-year period that I believe appears to artificially inflate the overall cost, because we would have that maintenance on our existing system as anyway. So that's my only clarification on putting that very large, but it is a very large number out there. So is there any other discussion surrounding the motion? If none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? There are none. All right, thank you. Is there any other business to come before the board at this time? Would seem not. Entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
We are adjourned.